Hello, this is the September 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Town Seal Review Committee. Since the committee, I'm John Arnold, the town moderator, the appointing authority. Since the committee doesn't have a chairman yet, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and then we'll start things off. And though I don't count as part of the quorum, but we have 5 of our 9 members here. So I'll call the meeting to order, it being 7:33, and the meeting was posted for 7:30. So we'll get some practice tonight if everybody agrees. I will take the minutes, but I'm hoping we can appoint a secretary by the time we're done, and then I will work with that person, but I'll take the minutes for tonight. And I'm going to try to play a lesser role than last time to sort of ease you into sort of running the show yourself, but I'm still here, and I'll come to the next few meetings, and I'll try to be here when I can. So the first order of business on the agenda is to accept the minutes of September 9th. Did everybody get a copy and look them over?
Yes.
Yes.
So the way this works is if anybody had suggested revisions, they could move to amend. But if nobody has any amendments to be made, someone can make a motion to approve the minutes of September 9th.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and you're Ian, right?
Yep.
Second the motion.
Second, okay, and you're Eric, right?
That's correct.
Okay, second. Any discussion? So typically, just so you know, typically the way it works in these meetings, somebody makes a motion. You amongst yourselves can decide whether a second is necessary. It's not a requirement if you decide it's with 9 members. And so you make a motion, that puts that topic on the table for discussion. And then the chairman could say, is there any discussion? If nobody says anything, then you can go to a vote. So we have a motion to approve the minutes of September 9th. All those in favor? Just raise your hand. Yeah, okay. 5 to nothing. Another sort of piece of just note-taking here. So it's 5 to nothing with 4 being absent. So the way the open meeting law works is if there was anyone who, if it wasn't unanimous, you have to have in the minutes making it clear who voted for and against. So typically the easiest way to do that. So for instance, if we had a John Smith who voted against, the minutes would say 5 to 1, Smith voted against, because the idea is for the minutes for anybody in the future to be able to figure out who voted for and who voted against. So more minutia. I'm sure you're loving the minutia as you go through all this. Okay, the next order of business on the agenda is committee organization for a chair, vice chair, and secretary. I talked about this last time. And I know it's okay if we want to postpone this a little bit because I know there's only 5 of us here. And for the viewers at home, after we scheduled this meeting, because of the beginning of the school year, there were a number of changes. We had one member who's a coach of a team whose schedule got changed. We have one person who's a teacher who couldn't get out of their parent-teacher duties. And we had one person who's out of town on business, and then I'm not sure the 4th person. But anyway, so that's why we only have 5 people here tonight. So I will ask if there's any of the 5 of you here, anybody itching to be chairman, vice chair, or secretary, or do you want more discussion about what those roles entail?
I think if it's possible to hold off that conversation till we have
Till more people are here?
People.
Okay.
One of the folks not here might be in that role.
All right.
Or at least not.
I did get indication from one member who's not here saying that they would be willing to be chair.
Okay.
But I think you're right. I think rather than, I don't know about the other 3. So rather than not having everyone state their claim, if everyone is okay with it, I'll run this meeting and I'll do the minutes. It's obviously, I'll have one of you actually submit the minutes. I'll work with somebody to actually review them, and then they can present them just like Wendy did. Wendy and I drafted them together, and they were submitted by Wendy because she was a committee member. So maybe one of you I can do an email exchange and do drafts. But we can defer that until we have more people here.
As far as just the vice chair, what would that entail?
The vice.
They step in if the chair.
Right, and to assist the chair. So a lot of times, just so it's not too much work, like for instance on the finance committee, the vice chair assists the chairman in terms of like helping post the meetings and reminding each other and reading drafts, and if somebody's busy. But the primary job of the vice chair is if the chairman's not here to run the meeting. And the secretary's main job is to take notes, submit the draft minutes, and then when the minutes are approved, submit them to the town clerk's office. And again, good news is the town clerk's on this committee. I'm not sure she wants to be secretary because she has plenty to do, but between her and me, we can help the person work through the process of how you do that. typically it's just you get a vote. We would take, the print had the draft, you would take the draft off, and then you would note that it was voted and either send a PDF or drop a hard copy off at the town clerk's office.
I'd be willing to serve as secretary. We don't have to decide it now, but just to.
Okay, all right,
An
great.
initial-
So I'll tell you what, so I'll put you down as Ian, secretary. So what I'll do, maybe if you could take notes tonight and I'll
Sure.
take notes, but I'll draft up the minutes if you want, just because I want you to fully participate in the conversation. But we'll work through the details and the minutia for that. If the committee wants, we won't vote on that tonight, just to see if anybody else wants to do that. I'm assuming everybody says that's fine. Okay.
Thank you, Ian.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, yes. Thank you, Ian, that's great.
In the future, I'll have a laptop as well.
That's right, yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems like we're closing if someone expressed interest.
So unless somebody unless somebody here wants to be chair, think about vice chair, and then we'll find out what the other 4 members think as well. Okay, and again, because I'm sort of using these as teaching moments, we don't have to take all this time that's on the agenda for, it's essentially, the person who makes the agenda guesses, and sometimes it's just to make sure the meeting doesn't run till midnight. Like I put in half-hour blocks. If we're done early, that's fine, but sometimes it's just that, oh, we've got this to do. Maybe we should continue the discussion at the next meeting or round things up. So there are guidelines, which is why the agenda says times are approximate. So if there's no more discussion on that, we can move to the discussion of the timeline. And again, if anybody wants to take these in a different order, we can. But I know at the last meeting, one of the things that came up is the idea of what really can be accomplished before the next annual town meeting. Again, not that there's a deadline, but just doing that. So I don't know if anybody wants to walk through possible steps. I don't know if anybody counted up like how many weeks there are between now and March. I didn't have time to do that. I guess we could get out our calendars and look. But again, I'm going to try not to drive the conversation, so I'm going to listen. Why
don't we do that? Why
Yeah.
don't we pull up our calendars? I assume everybody has a calendar.
Yeah.
And take a look at how many sessions we have before March 19th. Assuming we meet did we decide if we wanted to meet every other week or twice per month?
I thought it was twice per month.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
We had
I think that was my understanding.
Yeah, and we figured
Okay.
about 9 meetings until
Yeah, I think. we
Until the end of the
talked
year.
about that Last
So
time.
not including this one, that would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and potentially 2 in March. So about 12, not counting this one.
That's about 12 meetings.
About 12 meetings, not counting this one.
Well, there wouldn't necessarily be 2 in March either.
Right.
My take on it, I mean, we could strive for the getting where we want to be at the March meeting, and if halfway through we realize we're not going to make it, we always have the ability to say, let's put it off. Personally, I believe the nature of this conversation and the moment, the zeitgeist of the time, the longer we wait, the more the inertia of not doing anything seeps back in. So I'm interested in like continuing it now and not, what's that, justice denied, justice delayed is justice denied kind of thing. But that's a little more like politicking than maybe the mechanics of this committee. So basically where we've been in March is what we think, whether we think it should change or not, and offering a proposed process for the change.
Well, that's the complete charge of the committee.
Yeah.
The committee doesn't have to be done with the complete charge.
Yeah. So
But presumably we would want to have our kind of public hearings, or
Yeah,
we're
sure.
Right,
calling them
so
done
that-
by then, right?
That was my comment, is that there are several components to our work. I presume that we can all work something out amongst ourselves and come to some kind of an agreement, but part of this process is going to be communication with the public, right? So we need to set aside a clear chunk of time just dedicated to that. That will also take some planning. I agree with you on your point about the timeliness and the zeitgeist and all that stuff. But in that case, we need to be clear at what point, in what month, are we going to incorporate.
We should think of the rush. I don't think that, based on my, and again, I'm not talking to a committee member, I'm talking on my understanding of the way that this committee came to be, is that I don't think anyone would want the committee to rush to be done in March just because they thought the next chunk was October. And I'd also suggest that since, first of all, Nick's here, so we have a sixth member here.
Hello.
Thanks. Did your soccer game get rained out, or did you?
No,
you
we finished, and there was no traffic, so I was fortunate.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for your patience.
So it could be, I mean, I didn't think of this trajectory of the conversation. It could be, why don't we talk about the public, if it works for you, why don't we consider it's okay to talk about the public process now? Because what I was interpreting from Ala's point was that yes, the committee can take, that essentially any committee can take as much time as they think they're given, but at the same time, I think if there was a rush to be done in March and it skipped over a thorough public process,
Yeah.
I think the people on whichever side didn't agree with what came out might be a little miffed at that. So maybe part of this conversation should be how long, you know, what kind of public process, how long does it realistically take? Can you actually reach the public and get public input during the holidays and all that? So I'll leave it to you guys then.
My sense is that March really should only be a goal in terms of presenting some sort of a status report to town meeting, and that we don't assume that we're going to have anything more than a status report on where we are in the process, because I don't see us completing the process before March. I don't think we can. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but
What do you see as slowing us down, though? What part of it?
Just the whole involvement with the public and with us and our deliberations and our discussions. If we're only meeting twice a month, I don't think we're going to have much more than a status report by March. And John hit on one of the keys there, which is the holidays, which are going to come, and you're not going to have a whole lot of public involvement basically for 2 months. You're going to miss 2 months of our 6 months before March. So I think aiming for a status report for March makes a lot of sense, and doing what we can do and being realistic about what we can do and set up a public process, which we can discuss now. But I can't see that we would be anywhere near finished the process much before next summer, maybe, or June.
Let me just also mention that I'll let the discussion get back to you, is that it would be okay if, I mean, just so people don't think, just because if the committee feels you can't be done in March, and if the next town meeting is October, it doesn't mean the committee has to keep meeting. If the committee has its report and its recommendation in like June or July, the committee can just choose to not meet and essentially, or solicit more public opinion. It's just so happens, so it's not that the work has to continue. Yeah. It's not that the work has to, if it's not done in March, the work has to continue at some pace until October. It's just that when do the voters actually vote on it. But the ongoing public discussion can go ahead if a recommendation gets done at any point, whether the committee meets or not.
No, I didn't mean to imply that the committee would continue.
No, I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't
yeah.
that the committee had to
Right.
keep meeting 2 times a month. If you're done in June, then you just say we're done and you solicit public opinion and everybody gets to talk about it, and then the selectmen can decide when to whether it gets put on a special town meeting or whether it gets for October or whatever. So I was trying to point at procedural points. I'd let you guys decide.
You know, it's a very good point. I think what maybe we would need to discuss, and the consensus we would need to build the time between now and March is very feasible. But the other component, which is sort of somewhat beyond our control, people's attention, their ability to come, getting the room, like all, doing something like they did with the town master plan on the website. Is there a way to solicit people, like I see on the Lyman Street sign, go to this and tell us what you're thinking? Like, I mean, the fact that this is an open meeting is part and parcel of what we would say, here's how we've established a system, that there could be an audience here engaging in this. So
I would expect, as you move into deliberations,
Yeah.
I would expect there will be an audience.
And maybe what we could do is, you know, maybe we get lucky that actually goes smoother than I think, and by March we are ready to go. But if need be, we could take more time. So I guess I'll go back a little bit what I said a while ago about like let's get it done by March.
Wouldn't it also depend on how we solicit feedback from the public, how we gather public opinion?
Yes.
So because I know like having an open forum open forums, which is something, and if I'm veering into something I shouldn't, please tell me. But I'm thinking, yes, we should have some kind of open forum. Here, come to where we want to solicit your opinion. You want to, if you want to voice your opinion, please, we want to hear that. So we could have open public forums. Might it be possible to do something like solicit public opinion, additional to that, like through a survey, like a Google survey of some sort, where one has to put their name and address, and then they could express their opinion. So we would have written feedback that way. So we could touch different ways to be able to solicit opinion. And what I'm thinking about is as we do get into the holidays and we get into the midst of January, where it might be prohibitive for some people to get out to be able to come speak. I think, yes, it would depend on when do we time, what's the timing of those meetings? So would we look at trying to do one, yes, in the evening, perhaps one on maybe on a weekend, on a Saturday perhaps, early on a Saturday, or something during the day, where maybe someone who's unable to drive at night might be able to come and express their opinion. So that would be one way to be able to do this. But then additional to that, we could also look at, the technology exists, we could solicit public opinion that way through some kind of a survey too. And to speak to your point, if we were able to do that, maybe it's possible to get to something where we are conclusive by March. But the thing, my concern about trying to get to March is that I don't think it's in the interest of this committee, in the interest of the town, for us to look like we rushed through to get there. I think the more deliberative we are, and the more deliberate we are, I think that's in the best interest of the town, in the best interest of the community.
Can we also just be flexible with this? So it's okay to shoot for March, but be open to the possibility that we don't accomplish everything, given, given whatever might come up with the public process. Is it possible procedurally to just not have a firm?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the whole point of this discussion.
So,
it's really this committee setting goals.
Yeah.
But you're not. I mean, the way I view it, my understanding when I was asked to create and appoint this committee is, you're done when you're done. And it's up to this committee to decide the balance of when is enough deliberation and public opinion. I mean, you were asked, the charge is to have public forums and to meet with diverse stakeholders. But it's this committee's job to say, when have we heard enough that we think we got a sense of where we are? And I'm hoping that collectively, the 9 of you will know you're there when you're there. But there's no need to say, firmly we'll be there by then. So yes, setting targets is fine, but don't feel that they are fixed deadlines.
Right.
Yeah.
And so part of it is we won't know until we know, right? Until we conduct some of those sessions, we simply won't know. So I think that next item on the agenda, which is discussion of public process, which you sort of started already, it should be one of the main sort of points of today's meeting, is we should really sketch out not as much of a timeline, but a to-do list, right? At least sort of an understanding of what components would there be as parts of this public process. Are we able to use the whiteboard?
That's the question. Usually it says whether you can erase it or not, and I don't know if that's there for a class that's going to continue tomorrow. So unfortunately I don't know. But and unfortunately I don't see any sort of the flip charts or anything. But keep talking and I'll see what I can find.
Well, we could just simply start brainstorming about the components of the public process. I mean, maybe I could just use like a corner of that.
Yeah, if you can do some of it without erasing it, that's fine. I'm just worried that those are notes for a class tomorrow.
Not to go in teacher mode. I just we can. Is this yellow?
Well, I definitely like the idea of like different times, right? Because this doesn't work for everyone. So maybe upwards of 2 or 3 times a weekend, evenings, I would throw these in and maybe.
Thank you so much.
Granted, these has to be posted and all that, and it's on a curled piece of paper somewhere in town hall. People don't really know that we're meeting. As much as this helps a little bit, it would be great to have people come and be here. So, like the letter and spirit of like we're meeting and we'd like to hear your feedback.
So, Eric,
So as far as the to-do list, like you know, strive for meetings during the day, evenings, and weekend, and we could talk about how many of.
these meetings or
Well, I'm
outside
thinking more like
meetings?
a public forum, like
I think
this.
it's for informational meetings.
Yes.
Informational.
Feedback, maybe feedback meetings, because.
Or
we're-
listening sessions.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
listening sessions,
Daytime-
whatever you want to call them.
They can actually use important what we call them too.
What?
Yeah.
They can actually use important what we call them as well, just so that
Yeah.
the folks know, you know,
Yeah.
Right.
that they're really,
Right.
we're the audience and they're, we're there to hear them.
Yes.
The issue would be in the meetings, of course, you need to be able, the informational portion would be kind of what we're going to put together as kind of the history and what the town seal does, what it's for, what the history of it is, and then open it up just for reactions and feedback and input from the public. And I think it does have to be both the daytime, weekends, and
Yes.
evenings, because you need to hit everybody. The other thing you need to be careful about is we all talk about technology and using technology and Google this and surveys that, but there are a significant component of people in town that are not computer literate. And so we're going to have to be able to devise ways in which to reach those people that are not computer literate. And that's a bit more of a challenge. There's one thing, John, I forget, the tax bills go out. I don't know when the tax bills go out, but we have an opportunity when the tax bills go out every year to do inserts in the tax bills.
Yeah, we can talk to somebody and find out about that.
And so I think it's in late spring, so we
The
do
wa-
have
the
to have
water
our
bills-
act
The
together.
water bills go quarterly.
What?
The water bills, they go out
Yeah,
quarterly.
I don't know if they do inserts in the.
No, I've never seen inserts in anything except the tax bills, but the tax bills do have inserts. Even there, you're missing some people. But the fact is, I mean, people who have, I guess, mortgages where the mortgage company, I don't know, they don't get tax bills. But anyway, but there are methods for reaching people like the tax bill insert that we should take advantage of and things of that sort. So we have to develop a relatively concise thing in order to reach people then, even if it's just to announce meetings. But there are methods for reaching people who aren't technologically adept.
I just want to be sure that I write down your earlier point too. I'm sorry, could you remind me your name?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, thank you. You said something first before you talked about the Google Forms and the tax inserts, which was that there are two components to the public process, which was to gather information from folks, but also to present them with some information. To give information.
You have to give
so
information first.
I just want to be sure we are in agreement on the order of these events, because it's not immediately obvious to me that we want to give information first and then get feedback.
Well, I think if you're having a meeting and you start the meeting about the town seal, you need to start from a basis of explaining, giving information about what the town seal, what the current town seal is, how it came about, what purpose does it serve, how is it used, and where is it used. Then you can open, and so the people may have come into that meeting with absolutely no knowledge of the town seal except what they saw on the tax bill, if it's on the tax bill. So you need to start with an information for those people that come to a meeting. Then you can open it up in whatever way we deem is valuable.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement with that who's here, or?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of call that like we're establishing a baseline.
Uh-huh.
Basically just a broad outline of not only what this committee is trying to accomplish, what we hope to get as feedback, but enough, as possibly as neutral as it could be info, just so we could get informed comments versus like we're here to talk about the town seal. And so.
Yeah, it has to be neutral.
And I think
It's just
I
neutral
could see that
information.
kind of what that short presentation would be is something that this committee would come to an agreement upon.
Yep.
Right? Because of course, how you couch that
Yeah.
will, the answers you get depends on the questions you ask, obviously, right? So,
As a part of that, I think we would also have to just add in what this committee's charge is
Yeah.
not, what we are not
Okay.
charged to do, just to build on what Phyllis is saying. Because just that kind of clarity about what our goals are will help glean better feedback and opinion from the residents.
I think you're right, because if you're not careful, you're going to think, the people that are there are going to think that we're redesigning the seal,
That's
when in
right.
fact, that's not what we're there to
Right.
do. And they have to understand that
Yes.
we're there just to determine whether we want to change the seal, not that this committee is designing a new seal.
That's correct.
And so that also keeps it, the word you used was neutral. It keeps it neutral. It's just we're trying to decide whether we should change it or not change
Yeah.
it. That's what we're
and some
looking
of
for
the
input on.
feedback, I'd be curious on what would the residents of the town, people who came to this meeting, what do they think that process should entail? Should we do like they did back in the 70s where the high school students design it and someone picks it? Like,
I don't know that we would want to go that far.
but I mean, that's what people might be interested in sharing with us.
Well, they will, if they are, they will.
Because
We'll
one
get that.
of the things I believe that this committee is supposed to do is if we decide there's gonna be some type of change, we also then go further and say, this would be the process we would recommend.
So part of
That's part of
part of
our-
our gathering should not just be what do people feel about the seal, but if indeed there's a change to
Yeah.
be made, what should the process be to do that? Because we're gonna make a recommendation on
Hire
it. If-
professionals,
Yeah.
open it up to the art teachers in town, like, I don't know. You would have some good feedback
I
about
think that's a
that.
good idea.
So it looks like then we can start sketching out the to-do list, if not the timing or the length or whatever else, but we can at least start sketching out the to-do list for the public process. And it sounds to me like the first thing that we need to do is to prepare that presentation, right? Whatever its format will be, whether it's an insert, whether it's some kind of a slideshow that we put together, whatever it is, but some kind of an informational package that we first present to the public, right? So that's step one, is we present some kind of an informational packet from us. And then step two would be to create a process for getting the feedback from the public, which, as Phyllis said, would be not only online, because that would exclude some people, but online, and potentially inserts in tax bills, and then, maybe we can talk about other steps, but that would be step two. And then what happens after that, after we get feedback? Then we evaluate that, right? We review that internally.
And you know what, I think when we get to that point, it's somewhere with what you're writing out, I
Yep.
would suggest that we return to the expression we started with, which was a listening session. Because I think by the time we get to step two, we're gonna start to realize that we know when we know, which was the expression we used
Yes.
earlier. I think that's gonna probably happen. And more importantly, if it doesn't happen, then it most likely means we need to go solicit more information from the public.
Right.
And we need to make sure in trying to solicit from other people, from the many different constituencies in the town.
Right.
Yeah, and when I suggested the Google Forms, my thinking was that there are people who will not be, there are gonna be residents of the town who are just too busy, might wanna lend an opportunity to voice their opinion. That would be one method. I wasn't suggesting that it was the only method to do so. We could, if we do an insert, one way to do this too would be if we had a public forum, we could also have little note cards where the person is obliged to put their name and their address and all that, just like they would on the electronic form, and they could physically write it out.
Yep.
However, let's say you have someone who's unable to write, who might not be able to read, write, is unable to see, something like that, then the opportunity to voice an audio, to orally speak, is another modality we could use to be able to solicit opinion, teacher work modality.
Right, exactly. So, but this step, so as you were speaking, I was thinking, we could insert it either here, step 1A, or here 2A, and have a listening session. So for folks who are not responding to the survey or to the insert in the mail or to the note card, writing stuff down, who can actually walk up to a mic and speak their mind. And so there certainly will not be enough of those participants for us to constitute that as an exhaustive or a large enough sample or whatever else, but we can still have a session like that. So where would we embed that? Here after we present information, or here after we collect information?
I would suggest after step one.
After step one.
That would be.
So I'm gonna say
that,
step one.
just because it will start to gather some sentiment from the community.
And this could be in the same session too.
Yes.
I want to
these two
circle
things.
back to that insert in the tax bill. The insert in the tax bill, my concept for that is not that it's something that's going to be sent back to us. It's almost like an announcement that we're having an open session. Not that that's actually a method for feedback. It's a method for letting people know that we exist and that we would put forth that we are meeting. You are welcome to come to our open meetings, or we are having a meeting at the Senior Center on June 5th, or we are having an open session at the firehouse on a certain night. The insert in the tax bill would not be a feedback mechanism. It would be an announcement
Sort of how
mechanism.
how people can give feedback. You have
Yes,
to
it
think of
would
it,
be
the
an
tax bill
announcement
is like the size of an envelope, and it has to be printed on like
I
one
see.
side or so of that.
That's
So-
right, and so it would be an announcement mechanism of where we will be
I see.
having feedback mechanisms. Or, and I was thinking, taking this one step further, that if we could work with the IT guy to set up a website, or a web page for the town, it would have the web page on that insert that would say, if you want to go and give us feedback on the website, you can go here. So I don't think I was clear enough in what I meant
Sure.
by an insert in the tax bill.
Sure.
It's more of an announcement that we're here, this is where we will be available, this is
Sure.
where you can get in contact with us, this is what we're about if you want more information. And it would point them to those places where that information will be available.
So I switched that to announcement instead of surveys, but still though, if we are administering surveys, we can't just administer them online. We have to have
No,
other
that's
methods,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I
Yeah.
mean, then when we get to the question of surveys, you can't just do an online
Right.
survey, it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be other
But I
ways.
wanted to circle back to
Sure,
that.
okay, and
yeah.
this is
Tax
what-
bill thing.
Sure.
And just extra information, I think the committee can, and I can help point you in the right direction, learn from what the master plan committee did. They did outreach at the signs that are around town, and I believe in the past, a lot of times these surveys that are online, there's an announcement that you can pick up a paper copy at the library or at the town hall, is someplace in the town hall, and then usually
Yeah.
somebody just has printed out versions of it, and they can drop them off somewhere as well, so.
Okay.
Do we have any budget if we wanted to mail a printed notice on its own?
Probably not, but I can ask about that. I mean, it could be that the selectmen would let us use their mailing budget. I mean, this committee itself doesn't have a budget.
Right.
But if there's a request that can be made, I can help you get in touch with the right people.
I guess I'd be interested in finding out how many people actually get a printed tax bill.
Great.
Like, I don't think I do. I have it all through the mortgage payment, you know,
Well,
like anybody.
I know I get one, I know a number of people that do, but you're right. And
Yeah.
and it had been brought up in another committee I served on that not everybody does get a printed tax bill.
Right.
And so, assuming that you're getting everybody with the tax bills, it's not true, but you are getting a lot of people. There are a lot of people.
Right, another point of outreach, just to not forget, is the school. I mean, it doesn't include the elderly and people like me who don't have kids in school, but the school department
The backpacks.
has a very good system for getting what used to be the flyers that the kids would get in their backpacks for doing that online. So again, I understand the going for different modalities and different audiences, but certainly one way to get the word out would be to write something to see if the
Another-
schools would include it, so all the parents.
Another way that various committees have used outreach is through the churches and various faith organizations.
Sure.
And whatever, even if that is in fact just putting it up on a bulletin board at the church. But
Yep.
but the fact is that you have that option too, which
That's
is to
right.
reach out to the various
And
faith
especially
communities.
for a topic like this, which was partially brought up from those types of
That's right.
communities.
So
I'm sure this is
the
a
faith
topic that they'd be
communities
more
have
than
to be
willing to share
included
information.
also.
So those finer points of how we will reach people, I think, are very, very valuable, but we will definitely dig into them once we start getting closer to that step 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the moment, I think these 3 steps are going to be the first 3 steps, the first 3 components of the public process. They might even be the last 3 steps that we need to take, right? So I think now that we have the actual steps, I'm going to go sit down because I wrote everything I needed to write on the board. But maybe we can sketch out a sort of a tentative timeline for these. So when might we want to do step 1 and 1A? When might we want to do step 2 and step 3? Teacher out.
Very nice. Glad somebody took it.
Well, I guess for step 1, I think we should think about, we have info packet up there, right? But also, is it just simply something like a printed sheet, like a fact sheet? Is it, as we said earlier, a presentation we make at listening sessions, or is it both? How do we convey the information, but also what information do we give? I think we brought it up earlier. We don't want to sort of, be too subjective about it. We want to lead people one way or another, per se. Giving them the charge, giving them perhaps a brief bit of just what we received from, remind me of the town clerk's name, John?
Wendy?
Wendy, about just the usage of town seals. But I think we should also decide what more beyond that, if anything, do we want to provide.
Why don't we decide on roughly when we want to do it? We could probably have a whole session dedicated to figuring out those details of what goes into it.
But we should probably do it, my thought would be sooner, if it's
Yeah.
step 1, we should do it
Right.
ASAP.
Right. Well, going back to the charge, the first part of the charge was to review the history of the town seal, and that's sort of, and we have Mr. Vader here, who can talk whenever we're ready. He's here for another agenda item, but it seems to me that part of the, if you're going to do this sort of dominoes type process, part of it is to come up subjectively with what you've already started talking about. What is the town seal?
Yeah.
How did it get there? What's its purpose? And then from there, so that could very well be the focus of, of a big chunk of the next meeting.
Yeah.
Feel free to continue to talk about it now. But.
So should we formalize that somehow, that plan?
To me, I'm not sure it's something that actually needs a vote, but if you want to have a sense of consensus, then
Or at
just
least
get
captured in the minutes.
it'll be in the minutes, but if we want to capture the sense of the committee that seems to be the right trajectory, then I can capture that in the minutes. Or if
I don't
anybody
think it
wants,
needs to be voted on.
you don't?
No.
Yeah, it's not a formal action, it's more of a plan of attack,
Right, exactly. But are we in agreement that this should be the sequence of steps at least?
I can't even read it from here.
Well,
So step 1 says we
I'll
prepare an information packet for the public?
Step 1, information packet, and then that includes, and then there's, somewhere in here, there's a step 1A, which is listening sessions. And then step 2, maybe 1A and 2 blur together. Then there's surveys, mail, online, note cards. So essentially the way I captured it in the notes is you've got listening sessions for people to give oral feedback. You've got surveys, email or online for people to give electronic feedback, and then note cards or printed surveys for people to give written feedback who don't have access to computers, who prefer not to use a computer. That's how I interpreted that. And then step 3 is after that's done, the committee meets to deliberate and analyze it and then decides. It seems to me like this is some sort of loop where it's like, do you need more, or do you deliberate, and is there enough to make a recommendation?
Well, I think it's obvious that, the first one is you have to put together your information, get our ducks lined up so that we know what we're going to be presenting to people. I think there are a lot of things in that second section there that would have to be looked at and in what order we want to do them. The order that's up there, this was just a sort of brainstorming. Right. I think we have to take a look close.
It's the first level of abstraction.
But I think it makes sense that that's what we need to be doing.
For what it's worth, then it was great, a lot of information in the first meeting. When I left that meeting, I was thinking about someone who was talking about being on a jury, and I've never been on a jury, maybe some of you could share. And they said the jury came together, and at that point, once they've been given the instructions by the judge, it's the first time they're allowed to talk about the case. And it doesn't have to be tonight, but I would actually love the opportunity to actually go around and each of us tell us where you are in your mind, heart, and soul on this. it seems to be the elephant in the room. We were getting really sucked down to the whole about the minutia, about where we would spread the word about the listening session, as important as it is. We went through the thought, the process, sat with John and did all this to be here. And I think it would be helpful to kind of hear, as comfortable as people are, where they are, because in essence, that would be the heart and soul of our info packet. I mean, what the committee's supposed to do in the process, people can, I don't think that's what people would come to the meeting for. There's going to be people showing up because they really want to keep it as it is, and people showing up who feel passionate it should change. I think we're going to end up with that, and they might be looking to us as sort of like, you folks are out in the front showing up at meetings month after month after month. What do you think? We've got the historian, we're going to get a chance to hear from them. Like, I feel like I'm in the process of gathering information to I hate this expression, but like, be like the town elder, the wise elder, say like, listen, I've thought it through in a lot of ways that you and your busy lifestyle maybe haven't. It's just my opinion, of course, I want to hear yours. But do you guys think it would be important at some point to have us all share with them where you are on this board?
With who? With us or with the?
With this
With us,
committee.
just
I mean, if a
internally.
jury's going to come together and deliberate, which they're going to do, if first you go around and say, okay, I saw this and this is what I'm thinking. Like, I think it would help to go forward if we kind of knew what we were thinking. And what someone might say is, I really need to know more about like, what does the cotton gin really represent to people? And we can, a lot of us are historians here and teachers, we can then do that work to answer that question.
But it's, some of this I think it's kind of it's like a chicken egg question, okay? If we were, let's say, would be, what, 2, 4, 6 of us here, right? Let's say we went through the 9 of us, and all of us were, as we expressed opinion, we're all, let's say we're all in one direction, that we should, I'm going to say, I'll say, keep the seal, don't change it. Let's say that was the case. Does that then jade the listening session? Does that tinker with, if you listen to what we were speaking about earlier when we first started to brainstorm, was about trying to present material that was objective, trying to gather information. Let's say it was the other way. Let's say we were all 9 of us were pretty much unanimous in trying to say, okay, now the town ought to go take this seal in a different direction. We ought to change it, whatever it might be. Does that steer, does it direct the information we get from the public? I guess what I'm saying in a roundabout way is, are we better off not to say what we think? Yeah.
I don't think that that's reasonable. I mean, we are adults in this room, and I think it would be unreasonable for us to come here without an opinion. I think also that the way we were selected, at least, we talked about this in the first session a little bit, was that we all keep an open mind and we are able to engage with people who think differently from us. So I think that as long as we are trusted to be able to do that, there is no harm in having an opinion. I think it's more unreasonable not to.
I understand that. However, there is that sense of what happens with the group if we even start to, or the 9 of us start to talk about this, and what if, I'm hypothesizing here, but what if we are all heading in one direction? Does that then steer the decision-making of the committee before we have gathered the information from the public? And that's my concern. Because let's go back to what we want. If we want this to be open, we want it to be, and I used the word before, deliberative and deliberate with the way we go at this. Does that jade that decision-making? And that's why I'm just asking the question more rhetorically. And yes, I walked out of the meeting with the same thinking, like, I would like to tell you what I think about this and give you my opinion and give you what my thoughts are. But I just think that for a moment, might we just think about that a bit? And I agree with y'all. Maybe I'm all wet here, but I think the question needs to be asked. And I'm curious, what do you think about that? Okay, what do you think about that first? So it's kind of what should we do before we actually get to what we might want to do? if I'm slowing this down, it's not my intent, but I'm just concerned that someone watches us talk about this, and they go, oh, this committee they've already decided which way it's gonna go. And I don't think that's in the best interest of the community for us to do that.
But I think,
Sorry.
I think that the whole point of us being here is to listen to what the town wants. What I want is immaterial. I mean, I know what I want, but I have to be able to listen objectively to what other people say, have to weigh it and figure out, are the majority of responses and I'm listening to the majority of people, whether I agree with what the majority does or not is immaterial. I have to have the ability to say, well, I didn't want that, but that's the way it's going to go because that's the way the majority feels. And I thought that was sort of the intent here, is that we be able to listen, to weigh, to take a look at, irrespective of what we think. Because I know exactly what I think about it. And I think we did express that in the first meeting. But if I have to walk away and go, okay, well, the town doesn't agree with what I want, so the town rules. I don't rule. And I don't know that just because we each have a bend towards one or the other should matter. It shouldn't matter. What should matter is that we have the ability to listen to what other people say and what they want, and to be able to weigh that and to be able to say, okay, the town wants a new seal or the town doesn't want a new seal, and we need to go from there.
We also don't make the decision ultimately, right? So that's Phyllis's point is well made, is that ultimately if we make a recommendation at the March meeting that we say, let's say our recommendation is to change the seal, the town voters might still vote against that.
That's exactly right.
And that's
exactly right.
Big whoop. Okay, so I don't think there's either harm or much utility, but I think that for group dynamics, it certainly helps to know where everybody stands.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I heard the word we use the word objective. We're going to try to put materials out that are objective, and that's really, really hard to do. So.
I don't know that it's
well, I think
that
it could be hard.
hard.
I think it could be perceived as being hard to do. So
I guess I don't. I think
Yeah.
that it could be written so that you have a statement of this was the first town seal and it was changed because of this. This is the second town seal. This is the method where they developed the current town seal, and that's the way it's been, period, end of discussion. You've just given them the facts with no opinion about whether you think it sucks or it's wonderful. You know?
But just I would also say that some of us might feel that we should include more information than just that, right? So it's not just the precise information you put on there, it's the quantity of it, it's how much context you want to provide people with, right? Not just about here is the separate town seals. Also, do we want to provide information about what the cotton gin was? What
No.
Some of us might
Well,
wish to, right? So,
I would say no. You just say
but
it includes this, and this.
But I think to Eric's point, this is why it would be useful for us to kind of just know where everyone is on it, right? Because we might wish to have that information at least within the group before we decide what is objective and what's not, because that's a subjective decision.
I mean, if we don't say what the historic record, not what I think, but what's empirically in the historic record, the cotton gin is and what it wrought, that's actually saying something. Like, it's not a neutral thing not to say something. I mean, we wouldn't be here if it was a tree on the center of our seal. It's not about the town seal, it's about the cotton gin. That's my understanding, that's the controversy. No one thinks it's controversial that it says 1717 on there. So if we present the facts, and the facts are neutral on that, we've said something very loud, which is in the void. there's no not saying. I think it is, as I referred to the elephant room. Now, to both of your guys' point, maybe going around and all of us sort of doing that kind of come to like maybe that's not the best thing, or this is not the right time, or whatever. I think we can possibly move forward. I did say to John, and I strive to, and I want to be open-minded and take the feedback, but this is a sticky wicket. To pretend that it's just some lines on paper and that it's not about the cotton gin is, I think, disingenuous. And I'm sure if we get people to come to it, that's what we're going to hear a mouthful. So then when we get to step 3, we're going to have to analyze based on as empirical as the historic record is. They need to be agreed to or whatnot. And at the end of the day, the voters decide. So I think we have kind of a fail-safe where we're not the dictators on this with it. I guess what I'm saying is this is a great conversation because that info packet may actually be more about, let's tell you about the process and that you're here to help us as we move forward through this process. And maybe the sort of historian take on what the cotton seal is, that's not the time or place for it. That's something that there could be mass confusion in the town, and maybe we collectively could help as best as we are able with the help of other professionals set the record straight, right? I think my son looks at the cotton gin, or looks at their seal, he's 5.5, it triggers nothing in him. Other people, through their lived experience, look at it, and it's a really bad message. So this is something to keep in mind. This is why, John, maybe you're right, March is way too optimistic, you know.
Can I just, having said, listen, let me just give you some feedback, since you don't have much of an audience. So I understand both points, and as I reflected on the conversation, maybe I can offer a compromise, which is rather than everybody saying what they think, maybe people could think about having a chance as the discussion evolves into, these are the questions I want answered for me to make up my mind. So it's not I think it should be changed, I think it should be kept, but this is what I want to hear from people. Because it's outward focused, because it focuses on, these are the types of things I want to hear from others, whether the others are the other 8 on the committee or from the public. And then just another thing, just going back to the analogy about being on the jury, and one of the reasons for maybe not talking about guilt, if we think of the town seal as guilty or innocent, as you said, the jury doesn't get to really talk about that amongst themselves until they've heard the evidence. Now here, there really isn't evidence, but I would say the analog to evidence is, what do people think? And what do people think is the 8 other people, as well as all the people you want to hear from. So maybe a way to sort of navigate the minefield between Nick's legitimate concern about the perception of if some people say exactly what they think, is to just think about things in terms of, it's for each of you to think about, when I applied to be on this committee, these are the things that I want to get answers to find out if the answers agree with what I already think or not. And then to save most of the deliberation and most of the sort of opening the kimono or the soul searching for after you've had a chance to be influenced by that information from the outside. So again, looking outward to say, I'm not going to, this is the way I spoke with you when I interviewed all of the people on the committee. There are things that I have a preconceived notion of, I can see why this could or should happen, but like you, I'm not going to make up my mind until I hear what everybody else has to say about it. So maybe that's one way to go forward, is to just take for homework, not to say, do I think this should be changed or not, but what questions do I want to be answered when we have all this outreach? Because A, it will help you focus on the outreach, not on the trying to justify whatever your current opinion is. But just a thought.
Yeah, so maybe sort of the majority, the heart and soul of the info packet are a series of those open-ended questions that we pose to the folks that would be nice enough to come to give us their feedback.
Because it could help you also answer which things are best asked in the info packet versus maybe best reflected on for later public outreach after the info packet. And I think that's a good conversation to have. I think the question about, is it just history of the town seal, or is it history of the town seal, and oh, by the way, here's what may be off-putting or upsetting to people. I mean, that'll be a great conversation to have.
So no, go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to say, bringing it back to the agenda for tonight, since we have discussion of public process and then history of the town seal, so just since our goal for today was to settle on the steps for the public process, which we more or less settled on, I think the only thing that we haven't worked out.
Yeah.
No, that's not even just, so before we even switch to the presentation here, I think one thing that we do need to figure out is what we're going to do with step one and by when, and just sort of sketch that out a little bit at least, so that we can check that off and say we've discussed the public process, we know our next step. In the next session we might discuss what will go into that info packet and how and what that listening session is going to look like. So can we discuss that a bit? So my suggestion is that we prepare some kind of maybe a presentation of sorts, and so what kinds of things could go into it? What kinds of things could go into it?
Seems like sort of the highlights of what this committee has been charged to do, and the process as it goes forward would be maybe even just kind of one slide with that, like this is where we are.
So one slide,
this is how we got to here because of the motion at town meeting, right? Just to give people a little history of it.
So basically an overview of the committee's charge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One slide with the overview of the committee's charge, probably some information of what we're going to hear today, right, from the historians, right? A brief.
Yeah, and I do think, I want to mention something, because I think Phyllis said it very clearly, like, okay, here's the old seal, here are the other seals, this is what it is, and just factually state that. I thought, as I thought about it more, I agree with her that, yes, that putting that on a slide would be one thing.
Okay. So history of seals here in
I
this
think,
town.
but I think John brought up a good point, a really good point about what what if we, even at the next meeting, came in with questions we have, or questions that we had, which pushed us to apply to be on the committee. What if we showed some of those questions, like these are our questions? Because it might be a good way to center the focus of the listening session.
Well, I think the idea of the questions, whether they're the way you're phrasing it or John phrased it, is that it helps the people who are in the listening session or whatever to focus their thinking about it, rather than just a lot of personal opinions about the thing, is if we can develop some sort of questions, 3-4 questions, that will focus their thoughts on where we, in a sense, where we want them to go with those thoughts. But yeah, the questions will help to direct and control what we get back that's valuable to us in a listening session.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot. I think that's a good. Yeah, I think you're spot on that. And it's because if you ask the questions, they could be rhetorical in some ways. If you ask the questions that way, yes, we're going to get people's opinion, and fine, we want that. But it's the where do you think we should go? How do we change? Should we change it? And why should we change it? Why is it a problem?
What do you think a town seal communicates to everyone outside of the town of Westborough, right? In general, something like that. Questions like that.
Yeah, sort of open-ended questions, but those open-ended questions will help to direct the discussion to what we will find valuable in terms of applying it to the seal as it exists now, and would help us to determine, all right, if they've answered these questions, that the seal represents this, that the seal represents that, or the seal is whatever, it'll help us to come to some sort of a conclusion about whether the existing seal in fact serves that purpose now.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it doesn't serve the purpose that people sort of think it should, then maybe we do need to change it, because it's not serving the purpose that a town seal serves.
Yeah. I also really like leading with questions in this way, in terms of like how we present ourselves to the town. Because to me it speaks to approaching this as learners rather than kind of approaching this with our opinion to apply.
The Socratic method used in,
Yeah.
in town hall. Yes, I like that. Okay, so that's 4 slides, and it's not that much to prepare. Nonetheless, we want to be thorough and deliberate about this. So,
And you know, to add one more point to
Yep.
that, we'll know after we do the first one of these whether
Whether it worked.
whether it worked or not.
Right,
Okay,
that's exactly-
you
oh,
know,
it's very much
we
about
might come out of the meeting going, oh, that worked great. Wow, we got some, and hey, we got people on either side, etc. That may come up. We might come out of this saying we didn't get a clear idea, and maybe it means we'll have to refine the question. The question thing that's a great. I mean, you do it in the classroom. I'm sure that we do that in the classroom. You know, so you can ask the question rather than coming in and saying, "This is the way it should be." You know, do you ever stand in front of a group of students and say, I've been wondering about blah, 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 and then you ask the question, and it focuses the attention. And all human beings they like having that opportunity based on redirecting the question. It's a very, very productive way to do that.
so 4 slides, how many sessions do we think we need to actually prepare these 4 slides?
How many of our meetings do you?
1?
Oh, I'd say.
Yeah.
I don't
probably
disagree. I don't disagree.
One.
I think that the majority of time between now and that first step session that we're going to organize in town is going to be marketing it to the town
Oh,
and actually
that's the
making
big
sure that
problem.
people show up.
No, that's the big problem.
Right.
I mean, I think we can probably accomplish something on these 4 slides, maybe in our next meeting, and come up with 4 slides and some questions, especially if some of the people think about it beforehand.
Exactly.
But,
One or more of you could always draft, and again, can't deliberate, but if one or more of you want to volunteer to send out drafts of slides before the meeting,
Or
so the
exchange-
committee's ready to talk about it, that's perfectly okay.
well, an exchange of ideas or
Yes.
questions or whatever. But the marketing is going to be very difficult because that's where we need to get people involved and how are we going to get people out? How are we going to
Yes.
get people interested? How are we going to stir things up a little bit?
Right.
So that we get a participation
Right.
by a cross-section of people from town.
Could we put that on the next meeting's agenda? 1 is to prepare those 4 slides, and 2, to figure out the plan for marketing. And then we'll be in good shape to plan a date out for that
So the
first
first thing
step.
was info session sort of slides,
Uh-huh.
and the second thing was marketing, right? So you said?
Yes, exactly.
The
to set-
marketing plan?
Marketing plan.
Okay,
Yep.
marketing plan for public input.
Yes.
Is another way to look at think of marketing as outreach? Is that-
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly,
well, that's marketing
exactly.
is outreach.
Yeah. mhm.
How are we going to get
Yeah.
people involved?
How do we make sure that people show up to this, right? We will prepare our 4 slides, and if no one is in the room, we're all dressed up and know where to go.
Some of us won't be dressed up, but that's fine.
Some of us are coming from work, so.
Yeah.
We'll
I was
need
gonna
to-
say, I'm not coming from work, I don't get dressed up.
Just before I forget, I
I'll
want
have
to,
to
just because I
get
think Eric, just before I forget, again, I'm not trying to intervene, but just I not only had to interview 16 people, but I got flack as this committee. I think Eric and everybody brought up the point, the elephant in the room seems to be 100% the cotton gin. One way to think about questions, and I'll just tell you because I got both points of view, and one way to have an open-ended question to ask people for their opinions is to say something like, some people see the cotton gin as a landmark of American innovation. What's wrong with that? Other people say, regardless of the innovation, the cotton gin, wreaked havoc or did harm. What's right with that? And so one way to say it would be to say, on the spectrum of, first of all, I think the overriding question of what does the town want a seal to represent, whether the cotton gin is the thing Westborough is most known for, is a great question, or wants to be most known for. But in terms of getting the cotton gin to be the elephant in the room is, where do you stand and how do you feel about this pendulum from social damage to innovation and just focus that way, because that way I think everybody can take a stand on, you know, on one way or the other, where they are on it, or how they do their own cognitive dissonance for say like, well, yeah, it's innovative, but it did this or whatever. And I think it's, so one way to focus the conversation for the people who want to talk about the cotton gin would be to think of either a single question to ask people how they come to grips with that, or to come up with two questions is, how do you feel about how the other side feels about it? And because I think that will get people to, and you're probably good at this, how do you use these questions to get people to tell their story in the way what Phyllis said, which is, will make for effective deliberation later down the road?
I think that could even go on the survey. That's such a great question.
Yeah.
And it's simple, and it really...
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at all the mail that I got and all the people I've talked to, the two sides of the coin were, it's innovation, why aren't we proud of that? And then the other side is, regardless of what you think, this is what I think it did. And I think the historians in the room can talk about both sides of that. But I think where you'll really get people to say why they do or don't want to change the seal is how they express their opinion about that. And then the other avenue is, regardless of where we are, I think it was Phyllis who said, or whoever said, what purpose does the town seal serve? Is in the 21st century, Westborough, is the cotton gin the best symbol to be on a town seal? And I think that will bring the whole history of the town seal, purpose of the town seal, where are we, where have we been, where are we going to? And I think that, I mean, to me, based on what I've heard, that's the sort of things that people want to talk about. But make it real.
I think we made a ton of progress on this agenda item of discussion of public process.
Well, it just so happens that it's 8:40. People want it. Are we wrapped up with that? We do have Tony Baber here.
I'm ready
I
to
think
go
we've
on.
gotten where we need to be tonight.
Exactly.
Tony, do you want to come on up? Yeah.
Can I just sit down there?
Yes, yeah. I'll pretend it was like totally planned, but I mostly tried to guess how many the committee was going to be here. So we'll now move on. So thank you for that. That was very helpful, and I will try to capture the whole essence of that conversation in minutes. We're now moving on to the next item of the agenda, history of the town seal. We have an invited guest, Anthony Baver, local history librarian, and he's going to share with us what he knows and maybe take some feedback about maybe what he can help us find out. So.
Okay. So thank you for inviting me to speak with you tonight. So my understanding is that I was brought here to talk about the history of town seals in Massachusetts, the history of town seals in Westborough, and any research that I've conducted relating to this series, the town seal. So as the local history librarian here in Westborough and as a cultural historian, I'm here to say that I'm here to make your jobs more complicated. Although given the discussion, this actually might work to your benefit. So in terms of like with questions, but that's the nature of my job. That's the way that I see my job working. But what I have to say, what I hope is that it will help you think about the issue with more precision and more nuance. And if there's one thing that I would like you to take away, is it okay if I take the mask off? From tonight, it's that we strive for precision when we're talking about this issue. Now, when people articulate their views on this subject, you're going to find that lots of their thoughts and opinions can be contradictory, and there's going to be good reason for that. Mostly because we are dealing with a symbol, and like all figures of speech, or in this case, a figure of an image, their meaning can and often is slippery. And what I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk more about that. There's no easy way out here. But I hope to give you a framework for understanding how the contradictory opinions that people have expressed to me fit with one another and where they're coming from. So back in, gosh, it's been over a year ago. This is July 28th, 2020. I gave a presentation to the selectmen. And in preparing for this, I went back and reviewed that. And before I reviewed that, I had lots of thoughts in my head. I said, oh, I need to say this, I need to say that. And I came back and I reread that presentation and I thought, you know, that's pretty good. So, I guess with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read that to you. But I also, since that time, I've also had some other thoughts, some further thoughts on it, some other reflections, so I'm going to add into those. I've also done some research and have changed some of the things that I've learned. Or I should say, added to some of the things that I've learned, and I'll point those out when I come to them.
Yeah, just so for the record, can you share what you're going to read? Either tell us it's on the library website.
And that was the other thing that I was going to say is that I have it all printed out. I'm going to leave it all for you, but I can also give it to you in electronic
Yeah, just so I can
format
attach
as well.
the minutes in that way.
And it's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to read it all tonight, but I wanted to make it available to you so that you know it's there and you can read it and at your leisure, and if you so desire, it's that's up to you. Okay, so that'll make it easy if I can just read through this, and I'll stop at an appropriate part.
What was the impetus for your July 28th meeting with the select board?
They invited me to come and talk about the town seal. That I think that there was a movement to have an open forum about the town seal, and so they wanted me to come to talk preliminarily about it. What is some of the history of the town seal? What's some of the issues that are involved? So that they can make a decision as to is this forum appropriate
You were there
or not.
info packet going.
And then what happened is COVID came and we were not able to do any kind of forum, and it just got shelved. So so it's taken this time to get to that point.
But it was in response to the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd things, when people started talking to us like that, right?
Yeah, I would say that's probably what brought this issue.
Yeah, that was
the trigger for it. Right. So I've been asked to speak before you about our current town seal because objections have been raised about its depiction of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. The controversy stems from the fact that Whitney's machine greatly increased cotton production in the United States and made the industry so much more profitable that it ended up preserving and prolonging slavery throughout the American South at a time when it was beginning to wane. In addressing this issue, I have three aims: to give a brief history of our town seal, to present information about Eli Whitney, his cotton gin, and his relationship to Westborough, and three, to provide some reflections on the purposes and meanings of public symbols, like town seals and monuments. And if you permit me, I'm going to read my remarks like I am now because I want the words to be, again, we're back to the precision. I want to make sure that I'm being precise here. So in 1899, the General Court of Massachusetts passed a law mandating that every city and town in Massachusetts have a seal and that town clerks were responsible for maintaining their custody. There must have been some town seal industry or something that it's like insiders that, we all have to have this. Westborough's first town seal began to appear on its annual town report in 1913. The design is fairly generic, although to my modern eye, it has an antique charm to it. And if you haven't seen it already, that's what it looks like. As part of the celebration of its 250th anniversary in 1967, Westborough decided to change its town seal. It's actually more complicated than that, and that's where some of my additional research, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So according to the commemorative booklet for the celebration, art students from Westborough High School were invited to submit drawings for a new seal design. The anniversary committee ended up selecting 4 drawings to be used as a composite for the official seal: a sketch of the tower on Town Hall, an outline of a map of Westborough proclaiming it as the 100th town in Massachusetts, a pie crust edge around the seal, and a drawing of Eli Whitney's cotton gin based on his patent. The new seal appeared on the front cover of the commemorative booklet for the celebration and was used to create a commemorative coin. So I actually have both here. I have this is the commemorative booklet that came out. You may have seen it already. On the back is the other side, actually, of the coin. And I'll send both of these around.
Glad you're able to find it. I have not found my mother's
You know, anyway, yeah, so I'll pass this around so you can see it. It's kind of fun. So, okay. So the new seal appeared on the front cover of the commemorative booklet for the celebration and was used to create a commemorative coin. On the reverse side of the booklet and the coin is another drawing by a high school art student depicting, quote, an Indian lad in a deep forest setting. The Westborough Center for History and Culture in the Westborough Public Library has one of the coins, and I invited people to come in and to take a look at it, and I would show it to anyone else. So, but that's part of the history in terms of it becoming the seal. I did track down a newspaper article that talks about the decision behind the coming up with the original design and how that came about. And I'll make, again, all of this stuff I'll be making available to you.
Is that article about making it the 250th seal?
The 250th anniversary.
So that was from
seal.
67, not.
That's right.
Thank you.
So then there was a newspaper article which I didn't print off because it was in hard copy form here. This was from the South Middlesex News from March 9th, 1977. So this is 11 years from when the anniversary seal was selected. And it was the only reference that I could find in relationship to the town meeting where it was actually officially made the town seal. And this says, the FinCom committee will also recommend the voters adopt the existing town seal as the official seal. So that wording is very odd. So what it says to me is that I think coming off of that 250th anniversary, that this seal, and by the way, when I looked through all the 250th anniversary materials, this seal was everywhere. It was used, I think it just set a pattern for the town using this seal as sort of our seal, even though it hadn't officially gone through the approval process at town meeting, because all seals have to be approved through town meeting or through whatever the mechanism for that town is, for what they have. So then John Arnold, in talking with him, we speculate, he said, boy, I don't really have any memory of the town meeting of actually passing this. And so I went through, looking through all the town meetings, starting from 1966. So this is a lot. It took me 11 town meetings to get to it. I finally found it. This is from the town annual report in 1977. Indeed, it was Article 41 for the spring meeting that they officially, effective July 1st, 1978, that design selected for the 250th anniversary celebration, which incorporates the town hall steeple beside Eli Whitney's cotton gin and the outline of the town as a background. So that was more precisely how it came into being. So that's the basic history of how we got to our current seal. So now to Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney was born in Westborough in 1765 and left the town for good in 1789 at the age of 23 to attend Yale College. After finishing school and moving to Georgia, he received a patent for his cotton gin in 1794. Cotton gins had been around before Whitney's invention, most notably in India, and which dominated the world's cotton market well before the American South began producing and exporting cotton. But the particular strain of cotton that grew in the South had fibers that were tightly attached to its seeds, and the Indian cotton gins could not separate the two. That changed with Whitney's machine. Whereas before, one person could clean about a pound of cotton a day, Whitney's cotton gin increased cotton production by 4,900%. With great profits to be made from a worldwide demand for cotton textiles, this increased production capacity prompted cotton growers in the American South to expand their operations and created increased demand for arable land in the West. Since these growers relied on slaves to cultivate and process their cotton, the institution of slavery greatly expanded as well, and slaves were required to work longer and harder to meet production capacities. Whitney never realized the profits he expected to gain from his invention. Instead of selling cotton gins directly to cotton growers, he and his partner decided to charge farmers to clean their cotton for them, much like grist mills charge to grind corn or wheat. The simplicity of his cotton gin design, however, made it easy to copy. So the two ended up using all of their profits to fight patent infringements, and the company went bankrupt in 1797. Before we move on to my reflections on the purpose of public symbols, I want to share with you an experience I had while visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, was the best museum experience I've ever had. After moving through an exhibit on the history of the Atlantic slave trade, where the dark, crowded, and cramped setting gave the impression of being on a slave ship, I emerged into a large, bright hall devoted to the history of slavery in the United States. At the center of this exhibit hall was a large display of a cotton gin, and surrounding it were other artifacts from the practice of slavery in the U.S., including an early 19th century slave stone auction block from Hagerstown, Maryland. And I'm going to pass around, these are pictures that I took while I was there. The picture of the cotton gin, I can't tell you, it's kind of cut off because it was so big and so large and so prominent in it, I couldn't fit it into the frame of fully of what I was taking the picture of. In a recent interview in the New York Times, Lonnie Bunch, the former founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and now the head of the entire Smithsonian Institution, talks about ambiguity. He says, history often teaches us to embrace ambiguity, to understand there aren't simple answers to complex questions, and Americans tend to like simple answers to complex questions. So the challenge is to use history to help the public feel comfortable with nuance and complexity. As both a librarian and a cultural historian, my role is to help people become comfortable with nuance, complexity, and ambiguity. There are many issues at play in the debate and decision to change the design of our current town seal due to its depiction of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. Because the issue is complicated, we must carefully define the terms we are using in the debate and understand their implications. Yet, even then, ambiguity will inevitably arise. In debates such as this one and others concerning, say, Confederate statues, the term history is often used in a way that implies that because the past happened, that past is etched in stone and cannot be altered or erased. But history is a practice, not a simple chronicling of events, and as such, history never fossilizes in this way. Our picture of the past is always shaped by our ever-evolving perspective over time. The more we research an event, the more we consider additional context, and ironically, the further away we get from having lived under its shadow, the better we are able to understand that event. This new understanding will necessarily change the way we perceive and value that event. We also need to be clear about the purpose of seals, symbols, and monuments. These artistic representations are supposed to be embodiments of who we are, what we value, and what we aspire to be as a community, culture, and society. We put these symbols in public spaces, on government documents, in parks, on flags, to remind us and to proclaim to others what we together believe we represent. When our society experiences change, as it inevitably does, the symbols that once represented us in the past may no longer adequately do so for any given reason. But we have a social mechanism in place to take care of these situations. We have other public places where such outdated symbols can go: libraries, archives, museums, and other cultural institutions, so that they can be preserved and given proper context from the standpoint of our newly shared perspective. Yes, seals, symbols, and monuments are historical in the sense that they were created at a particular time and place, and they often involve history because the past shapes who we are today. But strictly speaking, they are not history. By replacing them, we are not erasing history. We are in fact engaging in history. For whatever reason, the people of Westborough in 1967 decided that their current seal no longer represented who they were and needed replacement. In the same way, we today can ask similar questions about whether or not our town seal continues to represent us and our values. The cotton gin displayed so prominently in an exhibit hall devoted to the history of slavery in Washington, D.C. raises many questions. I have two. First, would we as a town be proud if the label for this cotton gin displayed in this context pointed out that the person who designed it grew up in Westborough? And if not, then why would we want to display a prominent picture of this same machine on our town seal? My second question is, since Westborough is not mentioned in the exhibit label, how important is our town's connection to the cotton gin in the first place? At the very least, these are fair questions to ask. And now I have a third question that I'm adding, and this is what I'm adding today. Today I have another question. Eli Whitney does not appear on the town seal. His cotton gin does. That means that in the town seal, the cotton gin is being used to represent Eli Whitney symbolically. At the same time, the Smithsonian Institution, the preeminent cultural institution in the United States, uses the cotton gin as the symbol of American slavery in its exhibit on this topic. That is, it uses Eli Whitney's cotton gin symbolically to represent slavery in the same way that we are currently using it to represent Eli Whitney. So my question is, going forward, are we comfortable with these two symbolic readings being present on our town seal? If we want one symbolic reading, we have to have the other. We can't choose one and arbitrarily say that the other reading does not apply. But we could decide that we're comfortable with that. Of course, there is another way that we can read this symbol, and that is literally. It's just a cotton gin. And you will no doubt hear this argument. But then we might ask why a device that has no direct connection to our town appears on our town seal. Because once Eli Whitney enters the picture, we slide back into a symbolic meaning. When symbols no longer work for the people that they are supposed to represent, it makes sense that they try to replace them. This process, however, can be painful, both for the people who believe that the symbol continues to represent them, and for the people who seek to replace it, because it makes them feel like outsiders in that community. As painful and difficult as the process of coming to some agreement about the kind of seal we want for our town may be, we will, in the end, be better off for having the important discussion of who we are and who we want to be. From this perspective, seals, symbols, and monuments are serving their desired purpose because they force us as a society into having these kinds of conversations, sometimes whether we want to have them or not. We use history to tell stories about ourselves. These stories are powerful because they work to define who we think we are. So when these stories go through revision, it can be disorienting. We feel like if we reject the way that these narratives were originally handed down to us, that we are also rejecting our identity, and even worse, judging ourselves for originally holding such views. I understand, change is hard. But we all experience change throughout our lives, whether we like it or not, and quite often we come out better for it. As a student of culture and history, I am excited that we are having these kinds of conversations. I encourage people to become curious rather than resistant to new ways of thinking about and seeing the world. Maybe in the end, we as a community will decide that the current seal we have is just fine. But wouldn't it be fun to think about what we might rather see in its place, to put in the work of exploring who we are as a community, and thus make our community stronger as a result? We are reevaluating our town seal today because our understanding of Eli Whitney and his cotton gin is more nuanced, and consequently, much more interesting than it was in 1967. This new narrative tells us a lot more about who we are as a people and gives us the opportunity to reconsider who we want to be. That's what makes history so exciting. It's not really about the past, but about who we want to be in the future. And finally, I would be remiss as a librarian if I did not say that if any of you listening to me today are feeling confused or frustrated about any element of this controversy, the library is here to help. Librarians and I are available to direct you to resources that can help answer your questions or even help you to ask new ones, because what makes history so exciting is that we get to keep asking questions. So that's what I said to the selectmen. And how are we doing on time here? Okay, so I have a few more items of information and comments, and this kind of speaks, I guess, to the discussion here in terms of questions. I have some questions.
Can we ask you questions too?
Absolutely,
I just
absolutely.
have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
The statistic of the increase in the production of cotton by 4,900%, do you happen to have the figure on the expansion in the numbers in slavery?
That I don't have.
Okay.
I don't have. That'd be easy enough to
track down.
To track
I
down.
can do
That,
it.
yeah, well, that can be.
You can do that.
Sure.
So here are some of the questions that I think I could ask. Why was the cotton gin selected at the time? I guess for the seal, I should clarify that. Does that reasoning still hold given the new context of our society now? Should the same criteria used to create an anniversary seal be applied to creating a town seal? How beholden are we to the symbols and monuments we erected in the past? Should they be permanent no matter what? If they are not permanent, then what would prompt their replacement? Does the selection of symbols and the erection of monuments have a history? They do. Has the history changed over time? It has. And has there been changes in the design of public symbols and monuments over time? Yes. Why do all these histories and changes exist? All human beings are complex, contradictory, and fallible. In celebrating a person's accomplishment in a symbol or a monument, are we at the same time willing to accept all of that person's faults as well? So for example, in my research, I have not come across any information that indicates one way or another that Eli Whitney was a racist. Although some people in town have come to me and have claimed that that is what is being argued. But I've come across references that diminish his stature as an inventor, including the ingenuity behind his cotton gin. We just talked about how India, they've had cotton gins for hundreds of years. I've seen references where enslaved people have, here in America, where actually had cotton gins. Very often in the 19th century, inventors, they were known as the inventors because they got the patent. There were other people that actually had that invention and were going. So when we talk about ingenuity, well, you know, there's questions there. We could also talk about Whitney being a failed businessman. It all comes together. It's all part of that package. And maybe we can accept that, and that's fine. But we have to be willing to accept the whole package and understand that somewhere in time, faults could emerge. How deeply connected was Eli Whitney to Westborough? If we want to honor a person on our seal, is there someone else in our history who is more deserving? And then I just have a few facts about Eli Whitney, and these are all from Chris Allen's book, On the Beaten Path. Some of these I've already used. He was born in Westborough on December 8th, 1765. His mother was Betsy Fay, who was one of the first straw hat producers in Westborough, and she died when Eli was 12. His father was a mechanically inclined farmer. I can also say that he was very active in the town, which seems like probably throughout his life. I can't tell you the number of times, especially when I first came here as, first took over the role as the local history librarian and came across the signature of Eli Whitney and said, oh my gosh, look at, I found the Holy Grail. And only to realize it's his father over and over and over and over again. So, Eli Whitney Jr. entered Yale College in 1789 at age 23. He received a patent for his cotton gin in 1794. Court battles of patent infringement and a fire in his New Haven, Connecticut factory bankrupted his business, and he died in 1825 at the age of 59, and he is buried in New Haven, Connecticut. So that's basically the research. I also have, I will send you links to a couple other, if you don't know already, I write a newsletter for the Westborough Center. And so these are a couple of the articles that I had written for that newsletter. I think, one didn't, but I think the other one of them does have comments from people in town responding to what I wrote. So you could also read over those and get a sense of what some of the thoughts that people have.
I have a couple more questions.
Sure, absolutely.
It's such a wonderful resource just sitting right there in the It's hard not to use that right now. To your knowledge, does Yale proudly display any kind of connection with Eli Whitney or the cotton gin?
Boy, that's a great question. I have no idea.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea.
I
I know that there's a museum down in Connecticut that is connected to Eli Whitney. I think it's in the town where he lived in Connecticut and had some of his manufacturing.
I'd be very curious to see how they handle the symbolism around that, if they do. And then another question is that as the town cultural historian, do you happen to have a ready-made list of other famous people?
Of other famous people?
Who might represent Westborough?
I could easily, I don't have one written out right now, but I could easily put them. I mean, to my mind, if you were gonna talk about the most significant person in Westborough, it would by far be Ebenezer Parkman. And because he wrote a diary through all of for his time living here in Westborough when he took over in 1724, died in 1782. Kept a detailed diary of all of his interactions every day. We don't have the full diary because some of it is, parts of it are lost, but we have most of it. Because he was the reverend, he also kept the church records. So those are also very detailed. And because Westborough is history crazy, we have basically our complete records going back to the 18th century. And so in terms of studying a rural New England town in colonial America, looking for everyday life, there was no other town that has the kind of resources that we do because of him and because of his diary. Here's a problem. He owned slaves. His family was involved in the slave trade. So, are we going to accept that, if we put him on the seal, well, we also have to, be comfortable with that as his past as well. Esther Forbes comes to my mind. I don't know, I know she eventually moved out to Worcester, but she doesn't get nearly the play that she should here in town, as far as I'm concerned. She won the Pulitzer Prize and the Newbery Award. That's pretty remarkable.
Wow.
I'd talk to Fuller.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then, would you be able to share a PDF, some kind of an electronic record of this speech that you just gave to us here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. All of this I will be able to give to you in electronic form.
Perfect.
He sent it to me.
So should I send it to you, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Until we have a chairman, send it to me and I'll distribute it to the.
Okay, great.
I have a question too when
Go for it. That's what
I know that might be about time constraints or the excellent focus of where you're going and the three parts of it, but I'd be curious about the impact that was, I used the word earlier, wrought by the cotton gin vis-a-vis the land hunger, which greatly increased into Georgia, into Texas, and its impacts on Native Americans. The potential, one would look at it, is the pain doesn't end at the great expansion of slavery and the working longer hours, et cetera. And you, in your speech, there was sort of a place where that could have been mentioned. So I was just curious the thinking behind, like, gotta draw it somewhere, right? Because then the next thing,
Yeah.
so just,
Yeah.
just wondering in the light of like kind of what you're saying
Yeah.
about history and how it unfolds and story we tell and symbols, just any
Yeah.
comments on that?
Yeah. What I would say is that I'm not aware of that, and that's because I am I'm not an American historian. Ian is. He'd be able to be in a better position to research, and maybe he could even speak to that. I'm a librarian. I point people to information. I think people often talk to identify me as the town historian, and I'm not the town historian. There are people here in town that know so much more about the history than I do. I'm here to be able to direct. I get the questions in the same way that I got the question about the town seal. I did as much research as I can. I have to say, one of the things that was really frustrating is that there's not a lot of information about Eli Whitney. The last biography was written sometime like in the 60s or something like that. It was very frustrating trying to find something, and even as a librarian where I want to have information available in my room, there's just not a lot. So, I know that he was important in the, I think even when I was in, my 7th grade history, talking about him, but I'm not sure if that's the case anymore.
I wonder if we could use this exact speech and these exact materials as part of that step 1 in the presentation.
And that's where, when you were talking about questions, obviously I love questions. I think questions are the greatest thing. And I try to use, as someone who is doing public history, I think that we don't ask enough questions. There's too much of a heavy-handedness in terms of people could say to exhibits and so on, and trying to tell people the way that it is, when I think it's so much more interesting to get people to engage with what's up there and try to function as historians themselves. Start to ask questions and then become curious and then want to find out more themselves, rather than reading yet another label that that goes. So I'm an advocate of questions.
Are we okay on time, John? No.
Yeah, I mean, I'll stay as late as you want to stay. I'll just make note that it is 1:15. No, Tony's here. I'm sure you'll come back if the committee
Absolutely,
wants you to come
anytime you want me to come.
So I would say if people want to continue the conversation, that's fine. Wendy's not here. I don't know how much time we have to spend on the usage, because we can review that and you can review it and talk about it at future meetings. So I'd say keep going if you've got a few more questions.
I do have two.
I'm so sorry. And I was just to follow up. I was going to say, if you give me assignments, like give us a list, give me some assignments, and I'll go and do them.
So on the so my name's Nick, by the way.
Oh, Nick, nice to meet you.
So on the town street signs is the sleigh.
Yeah.
How did we get that as a symbol on the town street?
Yeah.
Street sign. So I'd like to know about that.
Yeah.
Question 1.
Yeah.
The other question: are there other inventions that have come out of Westborough? And I don't know if you can answer those tonight. I wouldn't expect you to be able to answer them tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But so if we were to, I'm wondering if the community was to consider looking at other symbols.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What other inventions? What other I'm going to use the word logo, which is probably, I feel like it's diminished relative to the seal, but I'm going to use the word logo for the hours not making me.
Yeah, you're done.
Think so cool. I'm thinking like in the school department for other events which were celebratory for the town. Have there been other crests, logos created?
Yeah.
Have there been other moments when the town has created other symbols relative to when we did so for the 250th anniversary?
Just the 300th was not too long ago.
Right.
That's right.
So, for example, I thought it was interesting that was nothing, to my knowledge, nothing was. I know there was all sorts of T-shirts and things like that, but but there was not an official. I don't recall seeing something officially.
It was essentially that committee's logo it just said 300 in Westborough. It's whatever is on the upper left of the town website was the official logo of that.
So but I just wondered when the town celebrated its 100th anniversary.
Right.
Was there something?
Right.
So
I have some of those collections.
So some of the things I'm wondering about why the sleigh? And
Yeah.
what was the process for us to get that?
Yeah.
And how about other moments in the town's history were there other crests, seals, things of that nature?
Yeah, yeah.
Had anything been produced through the school department for the children? Because a broad question I had, and I had put this when I applied to be on this committee, was what are we teaching the children in the community by the symbols that we have on the town seal?
That's great. These are good questions.
Like others here, we're teachers and school teachers, so, you know.
I can speak just a little bit to the sleigh because there were a couple major sleigh manufacturers here in town in the 19th century. One of them was innovative in terms of the design of sleigh that it was. I can't tell you right offhand sitting here what the innovation was in terms of that sleigh, but because they had that as you had a couple factories in town that were producing sleigh, that also meant that it spurred other industries around that industry. So in other words, leather. So we had a couple leather works or tanneries in town that would then supply the leather to the sleighs. The metal that was used in it. So there were metalworks companies in town, and so they would help supply that. And naturally, because we had the sleighs in place, that also melded into a bicycle industry. So because a lot of the same kind of materials that are used to make a sleigh are also to make a bicycle. So I mean, it's funny because there were the manufacturing in the 19th century here in Westborough was dramatic, and now the only vestige we really have of it is the mill building over on Milk Street, mostly because a lot of them burned down to the ground, and so cleared the way, and then of course we had the Bay State Abrasives Company there, which was huge. That was a major employer in town, and was very embedded and very important to the life of Westborough. I have a complete run.
There were several abrasives companies here in the 20th century.
The abrasives on the town seal.
At
least many of them are round.
There's a pretty grinding wheel over in Bay State Commons.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
There were a couple of abrasives. I mean, Bay State was the enormous one, but there was another one.
Bullard was the one down the way down to the dump.
Yeah, because Bullard was actually a client of my husband's company.
Yeah.
So I know there was Bullard abrasives, it was basically sandpaper.
There it is.
But but I have a complete run of the newsletters for that. I got to tell you, that's a wealth of information about our town because it was so important to our town.
So politically, the street sign logo, probably 10 years ago, the state came up with this is my recollection, and you can say the state came up with a new standard for all cities and towns to have street signs. And I think they came up with this is the typeface or this is the size, and each one on the left was supposed to have some sort of logo / seal. And it was a vote of the selectmen. That was not a town meeting action. I think the selectmen had to approve because the DPW had to submit the plan. So I think if you go back in the history of the sleigh on the street signs, that was a state mandated each town come up with a design. And if you drive around Massachusetts, like I live near the Grafton line, Grafton does have their town seal that has a Native American on it. I've actually started paying attention. I believe the colonial might be on the Shrewsbury ones or whatever. So, but that was sort of done as a selectman DPW process. But it would be interesting to go back and see why they didn't use the town seal. If it was just were they worried about the cotton gin then, or was it just the complexity of it didn't translate well into the small size or whatever? Yeah. So maybe there's stuff in the minutes of the selectmen.
So my last question, because I want to hot dominate this, so as we look at this, it seems like it's 18th century, 19th century symbolism. How about in the 20th century? And the question I have is, might it be time to look at something for the 21st century? Like, to be more, instead of always looking back at the history, should we look and direct forward?
Yep.
So is there something over the last 50 years that was produced in the community that might do that?
That's funny.
You know, one of the things I kind of laughed at, I like the idea, I mean, this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to take off my cultural historian, and I like the Rotary. I think the Rotary is at the center of the town. It speaks directly to Chris Allen's title, On the Beaten Path. The reason why Westborough has such a unique history is because of all the different roads that come through it. And it just makes it it's a place where a lot of people want to come because they can go into lots of different places. As we stand in line and try to go through the Rotary, people grumble about it. I think it's great because I see so many acts of kindness in terms of people coming in and allowing people to go, to come into it. And also, when you look at the history too, it was like Kelly Square before that. It was wide open, and so I think it was 1930s that they said we got to do something about this. And
there were trolley lines and horses.
Trolley lines. They had a railroad going through it at one point. I mean, it's really So, as something that affects all of us and that sits at the center of town, but I think also kind of captures the spirit of it. I'm no graphic designer, so I wouldn't know how to,
I've actually thought the same thing, which was what's emblematic of this town is it's crossroads.
Yep.
It's a crossroad. I mean, if you just take Route 9 and the Turnpike and 495, and it's a crossroad. One of the reasons we ended up moving here was because you could get to so many places from here easily.
You took the words on that. That's
and
why I
my
moved.
cousin is literally buying a home now as a second home up here. And the reason they picked Westborough, because I said to him, of all the places to pick, I mean, one kid lives in upstate New York and the other one lives in Boston, but he picked Westborough. And he said, because it's convenient to get to the other, and then they have another relative in Maine. It's convenient to get to all the other places.
Yep.
It's a crossroads, and I think it's why people, at least in the late 20th and 21st century, are ending up here, is because of the convenience. Not the Rotary, which is not convenient, but all of the other roads. Yeah, if I'd known about the Rotary, I would have bought a different house when I moved here, which was on the south side of the Rotary. It's a crossroads. So, but how do you depict a crossroads? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really like that too because it's like timeless.
Right.
Exactly.
But it's been a crossroads from the time Route 9 ran up.
Yep.
Well, I went to a talk about it was like Paleolithic life or something like way back, and they talked about how Westborough and area had a similar.
The tribes came through.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like crossing paths or if it was like rivers or something, but it goes way back, and I think that also speaks to looking forward the role that Westborough can continue to play into the future.
It's beautiful. Everyone, I'm so sorry to turn into a pumpkin, but I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning.
We're almost done. So can you hang out just a moment?
Yeah, I can hang out a couple minutes, but
so
it's
is it okay if we
9:30,
move on to next item? So Tony, feel free to stay there and listen if you want.
Okay.
So the next item on the agenda was usage of the town seal. Now, Wendy, of course, isn't here. These are just, so you all have the PDF that I emailed. Since it is getting a bit late, if we want to wait and talk about it when Wendy's here, but I think it's really just, I mean, especially in reflection to, did you get this?
I don't think I did.
It was in one of the emails I sent, so just check, but I can
double
resend
check.
it.
I thought I had
It was
the
I think it was in the second email I sent to the Town Seal Review Committee.
Same
Yeah.
email as the agenda.
But anyway, so I think reflecting on what Tony said, this is more as you said, the legal use and what you have to have it for. And then Wendy did a good job of just snipping out what some other town seals look like. So if the committee wants, you want to defer discussion on that, and I'll put that on the next agenda.
I would appreciate
That
it.
way we don't have to stay later. And again, it'll also let Wendy talk a little bit about that next agenda. Just let me write that down. And so really, and also Nick, you weren't here. We deferred the committee and the chair, vice chair, secretary till more people were here. So I'll put that on the agenda. for next time. And then the next thing is the agenda, date, time, place for next meeting. Now, I know earlier there was discussion about was it every other week or was it 2 times a month. I believe Wendy got this room using the every other week model for at least through October. And I know there was discussion about meeting at 7 versus 7:30. So the question is 2 weeks from tonight okay to schedule the next meeting? And then at the next one, we can talk about whether after October you want to go to 2 times rather than every other, because I think Wendy was trying to get this room at least because this is a nice big room we can reconfigure. So
7:30 though, I thought we decided.
Here's the question, because it was Ian, I think, who had wanted 7:30. The question is, and I know some people wished it was earlier, since it always takes us a few minutes to get going, do we want to post the meeting for 7:15? Or do we want to stick to 7:30 and just try to have everybody be here right on time so it doesn't start late?
I mean, I would appreciate it if it were a little earlier, because I have to.
Ian, would 7:15, could you get here close to 7:15?
I'll try. I
Okay.
wouldn't have been able to tonight.
You wouldn't have been, okay.
And for me, until the end of October,
Right.
because I'm coaching
Right, I
soccer. I
understand.
mean, this was fortuitous that it was 7:30 because I was only a few minutes late.
Well,
But
Kim,
it's fine.
you want to do one more at 7:30 and see how it goes? Where we just say, let's just assume we're going to have a pretty much hard stop at 9:30 because people have to get up early. So I'll do one more at 7:30. Does anybody have a calendar handy so I don't have to get my
Yes.
phone for what 2
It's
weeks
the
from today is?
October 7th.
So it's October 7th at 7:30, and I believe it's going to be here because I think Wendy got the room for here. And I think I have in the agenda, we're going to do committee organization. We'll really do chair, vice chair, secretary. We'll go over Wendy's report, and then I know I have notes from earlier in the night that the other 2 things were about the first one was more discussion about what's in the info packet, and this discussion informed that. And the second thing is discussion about marketing and outreach. So that's what'll be on the agenda, and if I get it wrong, I'll reissue the agenda. Any other items for tonight? If not, the way we do this is somebody on the committee has to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Nick moves that we adjourn. All in favor? That's 6-0.
Tony, thank
meeting
you
is
very
adjourned.
much. Thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Really.